Okay, picture this. It's November 2023. You've got OpenAI, a company basically built on brainpower, supposedly worth over $80 billion. Then, boom, the CEO, Sam Altman, gets fired by his own board. The reason? Something vague about not being consistently candid. But then, the very next Monday, nearly the entire staff, like 700 plus employees, say they'll quit and follow him out the door. Just, wow.
Yeah, it was absolutely wild. And it wasn't just some boardroom spat. It was this incredibly stark moment revealing what really matters in tech right now. It proved, I think, that one individual's knack for putting together and leading the right team, that alone can represent an $80 billion valuation.
That's the core of it, isn't it? The human capital.
Entirely. The value wasn't just the algorithms, it was the network, the team held together by him.
So let's really dig into this. How does a guy from St. Louis, a vegetarian no less, become maybe the most pivotal figure in the race for artificial general intelligence, AGI? That's what we're exploring today, the journey of Sam Altman trying to pull out the strategic and technical lessons behind all the headlines.
Sounds good. Where do we start? His background?
Yeah, let's start there. Born 1985, St. Louis, Missouri. The material suggests a strong sense of purpose early on, influenced by the Jewish idea of tikkun olam, this responsibility to improve the world.
And what's really interesting is how quickly that purpose merged with tech. Gets an Apple Mac when he's just 8, teaches himself coding. But alongside that tech dive, he's navigating being different. He came out as gay at 16, which in the Midwest back then took some courage.
Right, and that seems to have set a pattern. There's that story about him confronting his high school after a group boycotted an assembly on sexuality. He basically asked them, are you going to be repressive or are you open to different ideas? That's pretty bold for a teenager.
Exactly, and you see that thread throughout his career, I think. This blend of deep technical grasp coupled with a real willingness to challenge the status quo, whether it's social norms in Missouri or, the established ways of doing things in Silicon Valley. That push against the norm is constant.
So that ambition takes him to Stanford for computer science, but not for long.
Nope. 2 years in 2005, he drops out. He wants to go all in on the company he'd already co-founded, Looped.
Looped. That was one of the early location sharing apps for phones, wasn't it?
That's right. They worked on it for years, eventually sold it in 2012 for about $43.4 million. Sounds okay on the surface, but, and this is crucial for understanding his later moves, the sale actually delivered a negative return for the venture capitalists who initially backed them.
Ouch. So the people who took the early gamble lost money. That's got to sting.
It's a defining lesson, I think. It seems to have taught him firsthand how external VC pressure, especially too early, can force founders into, suboptimal decisions and exits that don't maximize long-term value.
And that directly leads him to the other side of the table.
Immediately. He co-founds an investment fund, Hydrazine Capital, raises $21 million. And here's the interesting bit. He plows 75% of that straight into companies coming out of Y Combinator, or YC.
Which pretty quickly leads to him actually running the place. He becomes president of YC in 2014.
Right. And YC was already huge.
Yep.
Then Airbnb, Dropbox, Stripe came out of there. The portfolio value was something like $65 billion. But Altman saw a structural problem, likely stemming from that Looped experience. He felt VCs were putting too much pressure on companies as they tried to scale after the initial YC phase.
So he creates YC continuity.
Exactly. A $700 million fund, specifically designed to provide that later stage funding from within the YC ecosystem.
Keeping control, reducing external pressure makes total sense given Looped.
Precisely. It was about protecting the long-term vision, shielding founders. He wasn't just growing YC, he was trying to reshape how promising tech companies get funded and scaled.
And during this YC period, there's that fascinating detail. He starts using an AI bot nicknamed HAL 9000 to help screen applications.
Yeah, that's more than just a quirky detail, I think. For anyone interested in the tech side, this is really telling. He was using machine learning very early on, not just for product development, but for trying to predict founder success. The neural net learned from past applications, correlated them with company outcomes. It was essentially an early attempt at automating the spotting of potential genius, years before ChatGPT was even a concept.
Thinking about AI scaling people systems, not just code.
Right, harnessing intelligence to build better human organizations.
So fast forward to 2019, he decides to step away from the day-to-day at YC. Why?
To pour all his energy into OpenAI, the research lab he'd co-founded back in 2015 with people like Greg Brockman, Ilya Sutskever, and initially Elon Musk was involved too.
And the mission behind OpenAI was different from the start, wasn't it? It wasn't initially about building a huge commercial entity.
No, quite the opposite, at least in theory. The founding idea was driven by a fear The fear that powerful AI could be dangerous and that it might get monopolized by big tech companies like Google. They framed it almost like a Manhattan Project for AI, but aimed at ensuring AI benefited all of humanity. It started as a nonprofit focused on open source research and safety.
Which is ironic, given where it ended up.
Well, yeah. The path from nonprofit ideal to the launch of ChatGPT in November 2022 was complicated.
And ChatGPT just exploded. 100 million weekly users almost overnight. Fastest growing platform ever. Suddenly, Sam Altman is a global name.
Absolutely. And the company's valuation just went vertical, from maybe $3 billion in 2019 to, as we said, over $80 billion by late 2023.
That kind of growth must have created enormous internal pressures.
Immense. And external ones, too. That rapid scaling drew huge global attention. Remember his world tour in the summer of 2023?
Yeah, the sources mentioned that 22 countries meeting leaders like the German Chancellor, the UK Prime Minister.
He wasn't just building tech, he was doing preemptive global diplomacy, trying to shape the narrative around AI's capabilities and, crucially, the risks and the need for regulation,
While simultaneously driving the commercialization that seemed to conflict with the original nonprofit mission.
That's the core tension. You have this unique, arguably unstable structure, a nonprofit board overseeing a capped profit commercial subsidiary. The faster the commercial side grew, the more pressure it put on that original governance model. That fault line, I think, is what finally fractured in November 2023.
Okay, let's go back to that crisis. November 17th, the board fires him. The reason given is being not consistently candid, which is vague.
Extremely vague, and the situation was complex. Remember, Ilya Sutskever, the chief scientist and a co-founder deeply committed to the safety mission, was initially part of the group that voted him out.
Right, that seems key. If his own co-founder felt there was a candor issue, doesn't that point to a real governance problem?
It certainly points to a massive clash in vision and governance, yes. You had the safety-focused, effective altruism wing of the board, arguably trying to uphold the original nonprofit mission, colliding head-on with Altman's drive to accelerate development and commercialize. The board tried to assert its control based on the nonprofit charter.
But the employees didn't buy it.
Not at all. Microsoft instantly offered Altman a job leading a new AI division, but the truly stunning part was the reaction from OpenAI staff.
Over 700 out of 770 signed that letter, threatening to follow him to Microsoft. Even Sutskever quickly reversed course, apologized, and demanded Altman's return.
The loyalty was just staggering. And it proved in real time that Altman's indispensable value wasn't necessarily in writing the code, but in his unique ability to, find, assemble, motivate, and lead these incredibly high-performing complex teams.
The human capital again.
Absolutely. When the people who actually build the value made it clear their loyalty was to the leader, not the nonprofit structure or even the stated mission at that point, the structure had no choice but to bend. He was back as CEO just days later.
The lesson seems pretty clear. In this game, leadership that can attract and retain top talent is the ultimate strategic advantage.
It's the ultimate moat, as they say.
Yeah.
More valuable than any single algorithm.
So even with OpenAI consuming so much, he's still a major investor elsewhere, right? Involved in hundreds of companies.
Yeah, his personal investments are substantial, reportedly over $2.8 billion across maybe 400 companies. But his focus is really interesting. He specifically targets what he calls hard startups. Projects tackling fundamental scientific or engineering challenges, meaning huge capital investment for breakthroughs, not just another app.
Like what areas?
The big ones. AI, obviously, but also nuclear energy and biotechnology. He's chairman of Oklo, which works on nuclear fission. And he's personally put a huge amount, over $375 million, into helium energy, focusing on nuclear fusion.
Fusion, the holy grail of clean energy. He increased his bet there, didn't he?
He did. Apparently, he became convinced fusion was achievable, just drastically underfunded. So he poured more capital in. Classic Altman. Identify a bottleneck, solve it with massive resources.
And then there's longevity research.
Right. Over $180 million into a company called Retro Biosciences. Their goal is researching ways to essentially rejuvenate human biology, maybe extend healthy lifespan by a decade. Big, ambitious bets.
Which leads us to perhaps the most ambitious, almost sci-fi level bet of all. This reported plan to raise $7 trillion.
Yes, $7 trillion with a T.
What on earth for?
To fundamentally reshape the global semiconductor industry, to build out vastly more AI chip manufacturing capacity.
That's more than the GDP of Japan or Germany. Is that realistic or just...
Completely out there. It's audacious, bordering on unbelievable. But the strategic thinking behind it, it's actually quite sharp. if maybe a little terrifying. He seems to believe the primary bottleneck for future AI progress, especially towards AGI, won't be the algorithms or the software ideas. It'll be the physical hardware, the chips, the compute power.
An infrastructure play, but on a planetary scale.
Exactly. He's betting on future infrastructure scarcity. The idea is that whoever controls the manufacturing and supply of next-generation AI chips effectively controls the pace and direction of AI development worldwide. He's trying to use capital to solve a future geopolitical resource constraint before it fully materializes.
It reframes the entire AI race from software to hardware dominant.
Pretty much. It's a massive gamble on where the real leverage will be.
Beyond the hardware and the funding, there's a deep philosophical layer to his thinking, too. He's talked about humans not being necessarily unique.
Yeah, there's that quote from back in 2012 where he said he'd given up on the idea of human uniqueness. He speculated that compared to future AIs, our learning rate, like 2 bits per second, might seem incredibly slow, like slowed down whale songs.
That's a pretty humbling perspective.
It underpins his view of the future. He seems to genuinely believe AGI is coming, maybe even this decade, and that it will create unprecedented wealth, but also potentially make most traditional human labor obsolete. A leisure society, as he sometimes calls it.
Which brings us to ideas like universal basic income.
Right. UBI has been his proposed solution for distributing that massive new wealth. But lately, he's been framing it slightly differently, as universal basic compute, or UBC.
Okay, explain the difference. Why compute instead of cash?
Well, the idea, as I understand it, is that in a world saturated with AI-driven wealth, the truly valuable resource won't just be money, it'll be access to powerful computation itself. So UBC wouldn't just give you cash. It would guarantee every person access to a significant baseline level of computing power, say, the equivalent of a future GPT-7 model.
So everyone gets their own AI powerhouse.
Sort of. The thinking is that this access empowers individuals to create, innovate, participate in the new economy, solve problems using AI tools. It's distributing the means of production in the AI era, not just the profits.
Interesting. It shifts the focus from passive income to active capability.
Exactly. It's a fundamentally different vision of what universal support looks like in an AI-driven future.
Finally, let's touch on his political maneuvering. The sources note a significant shift. He opposed the previous Republican administration, but seems much closer to the current one. Donated significantly, appeared at announcements like the Stargate project.
Yeah, that shift is noticeable. But I don't think it signals a deep ideological change. It looks much more like a pragmatic strategy.
Proximity to power.
Exactly. Regulatory proximity. His primary goal seems to be ensuring the path for advanced AI development remains as clear as possible. By working closely with whoever holds power, regardless of their party, he aims to keep the government essentially as a partner, or at least not an obstacle.
Makes sense for someone trying to build something as potentially disruptive as AGI. You need Washington on board, or at least neutralize.
It's a critical lesson for founders in any deeply impactful, potentially regulated tech space. Engagement with power is part of the strategy.
Okay, so wrapping this all up, we've gone from his early days through the looped exit lessons, scaling YC, founding OpenAI, navigating that insane crisis, to these huge bets on fusion, longevity, and trillions for chips. What are the key takeaways? If you're listening to this working in tech or investing, what does Altman's story really tell us about where things are heading?
I think there are 3 core insights that really stand out from his journey so far. First, leadership is the ultimate moat. That 2023 crisis was the clearest proof imaginable. The ability to attract, inspire, and retain genius-level talent is more defensible, more valuable than any piece of code. Your strategy for managing human capital is your core competitive advantage now.
Makes sense. What's number 2? Second, bet big on infrastructure scarcity. That $7 trillion chip plan, however audacious, highlights a fundamental belief. The next big constraint isn't ideas, it's the physical stuff, the compute, the energy, the manufacturing needed to realize those ideas at scale. If you want to own the future, figure out what will be scarce and build it.
Find the bottleneck.
Find the bottleneck and solve it with overwhelming force or capital. And third, prepare for the philosophical shift. Altman's perspective that machine intelligence might soon surpass human cognitive abilities in many areas forces a really profound question on all of us. If our intelligence isn't the unique pinnacle we thought it was, how do we need to fundamentally rethink our society, our economy, maybe even our purpose? Concepts like universal basic compute are just the beginning of grappling with that.
Right.
Which leads to a final thought for you, the listener. Imagine that future Altman envisions. AGI is here, maybe work as we know it is different, and you have guaranteed access to incredibly powerful AI through something like universal basic compute. How would you use that resource? What would you build, create, discover, or simply do with guaranteed access to that kind of computational power? It's a big question, and definitely something worth mulling over as we all navigate what's coming in this AI era.